Good evening, tired traveler, drifting in from wherever the day left you. You've made it to that soft borderland where your shoulders finally drop, where the room can be dark, and where nobody asks you to be efficient. Tonight, you don't have to fix anything. You only have to listen and let the world speak more slowly. Morning arrives in Venice as a hush. Fog thickens in the canals until distance becomes a rumor. Lanterns hang like small moons at street level. Facades lose their edges and turn into watercolor smudges. Balconies, shutters, carved stone faces, appearing for a second, then dissolving again. Even the water seems to breathe instead of sparkle. And yes, quick reality check. You probably won't survive this in the way you survive most days, through clenched teeth, frantic scrolling, and that heroic little delusion that you can outwork exhaustion. This kind of survival is quieter. It's the kind where you let go, slightly terrifying, conveniently effective. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been, your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now, turn off the lights. Take a deep, slow breath, let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. You stand at the edge of a Venetian canal, toes near stones polished by centuries of footsteps. The world is pearl gray. The canal is a ribbon of dark ink moving quietly under the mist. Across the water, buildings hover like patient ghosts, their lower walls stained where high tides have kissed them again and again. Somewhere far away, a gull calls, but even the bird sounds muffled, as if it's speaking through a pillow. A gondola waits beside a narrow landing, black, glossy, long, and improbably graceful. Its prow rises in a clean curve, and the metal at the front catches what little light exists, a dull silver flare that fades the moment you focus on it. The boat looks less like transport and more like a promise to go slowly. When you step in, it answers with a small shift, controlled and gentle. Your body finds balance before your mind can make a committee meeting out of it. You settle onto the padded seat. The fabric is cool, and it carries that quiet scent of river water and lacquered wood. Your spine loosens, almost surprised by its own permission to rest. The gondola begins to move so smoothly you only notice by the changing texture of the water. There's no engine, no growl, no rush. Motion arrives like a deep exhale. The hull slips forward, and the fog, instead of parting dramatically, simply makes room, as if you are passing through a place that already expected you. You watch the canal's surface. It isn't a mirror, it's a memory. It holds reflections of windows and lamps in blurred streaks, then breaks them into trembling lines. Tiny waves tap the gondola's side with patient fingertips. Each touch is soft, repetitive, oddly comforting, like the world checking that you're still here. The city drifts past in fragments, A striped mooring post rises out of the water, then vanishes behind you. A doorway sits at water level, steps half submerged, as if Venice was designed for people who don't mind damp shoes and complicated architecture. A small boat rests under a tarp that looks like a sleeping animal. Nothing demands attention, yet everything quietly earns it. Above, facades fade into the mist. Pale cream, washed terracotta, tired green. Plaster wears age like a cloak. Iron balconies curl outward with floral patterns, as if the metal grew there rather than being forced. You catch a row of dark windows, like closed eyes along a canal. Somewhere behind those shutters, someone is still in bed, still dreaming, still refusing to accept the concept of productivity. Honestly, they're onto something. Your thoughts try to climb aboard, lists, worries, that unfinished conversation you keep replaying. You feel them arrive at the edge of awareness, tapping politely. You don't have to wrestle them, you just don't open the door. The gondola doesn't have much space for panic anyway, and the fog has a way of swallowing anything loud. The water carries you deeper. The landing disappears behind the mist, erased as neatly as chalk on a wet slate. Ahead, the canal bends, and the bend is nothing but thicker gray, a soft wall that promises more city on the other side. It should feel uncertain. Instead, it feels like a blanket being lifted to tuck you in. You begin to notice the small mechanics of calm, the way your breath slows when there's nothing to keep pace with, the way your jaw unclenches when you stop pretending, the way your eyes soften when the world refuses to sharpen. Venice doesn't ask your resume. It doesn't care if you answered your emails. It only asks whether you can be present long enough to let water, fog, and old stone teach you how to be quiet. The gondola continues its silent glide, unhurried, and the tightness in your chest loosens by one careful degree. The mist closes behind you, and you let it. Tonight, the unknown is not a threat. It is an invitation to rest. The unknown ahead stays kind, and you let yourself sink into it a little more, as if your bones finally remember they were never meant to be armor. The gondola keeps moving with that unbothered elegance that feels almost insulting to your usual way of traveling through life, rushing, bracing, checking, rechecking. Here, motion doesn't demand vigilance, it offers rhythm. You start noticing what actually makes the gondola glide. Not magic, not luck, not some romantic promise printed on a postcard, but a steady, disciplined pattern that repeats like a lullaby. The oar enters your awareness the way a clock's ticking does when everything else goes quiet. There's a soft wooden creak, a controlled dip, and then the faintest shiver of water reorganizing itself around the blade. The sound isn't loud enough to be called a sound, really. It's more like a texture, a whisper made of wood and tide. Each stroke is patient. The gondola doesn't surge forward like it's eager to prove something. It slides, gathers, settles, slides again. You can almost feel the forking cradle that holds the oar, carved wood guiding the angle, allowing small changes in pressure. The mechanics are old, refined by countless mornings like this one, by hands that learned not to fight the canal, but to cooperate with it. You don't see any struggle, You see practiced calm, the kind of calm you usually assume other people are born with, while you were born with a stress response and a calendar app. Water carries its own memory, and Venice has taught it to keep secrets. The canal isn't fresh, it's brackish, a mingling of sea and river, salt and silt, tides and weather. It smells faintly of algae and stone that's been damp for so long it has stopped complaining. You breathe it in and realize your body is adapting without asking permission. Your inhale becomes slower, deeper, less defensive. Your exhale is longer. You can track the gondola's movement by the rise and fall of your breath, like you've been gently synchronized. The fog still hugs everything, but it shifts now and then, loosening like a hand that's been gripping too tightly. As you glide, shapes appear the way ideas appear when you're half asleep, incomplete, convincing, and strangely emotional. A facade emerges, arches at water level, columns fading upward into gray. A lantern burns behind mist, its light stretched into a soft halo. A bridge appears as a curved shadow overhead, then slips past so quietly it feels like it never happened. Sound travels differently here. The fog muffles the faraway world, but it also makes close sounds feel intimate. The small lap of water against stone is suddenly important. The distant clink of something metal, maybe a mooring ring, maybe a boat being readied, arrives softened, as if the city is handling it carefully so it won't wake you. Even your own movements in the seat seem louder than they should be, so you become still by instinct, like a guest in a house where everyone else is asleep. The gondola's hull responds to every subtlety. When it passes a post, the water tightens and then releases. When it slides close to a wall, the ripples flatten and move outward in thin, trembling lines. You watch how reflections warp. Windows become ribbons, lights become commas, and everything looks like it's being written into the canal rather than merely reflected. Venice feels less like a place and more like a handwriting style, looping, old-fashioned, and occasionally indecipherable, which is honestly part of the charm. You begin to learn the gondola's balance through your body rather than your mind. There's a slight tilt when the oar pulls, a tiny correction when the canal narrows, a gentle sway as the boat threads between posts. Your muscles stop trying to control it. They stop anticipating disaster. You let the gondola teach you the difference between instability and movement. One is panic, the other is life. In the mist, a tall shape rises, a bell tower maybe, or the corner of a larger building, seen only in silhouette. It feels monumental even when partially erased. You realize Venice isn't trying to impress you with clarity, it's offering you softness instead. It's saying, you don't need every detail to be certain. You can be carried by what's consistent, the oar, the water, the slow forward drift. A small boat passes somewhere nearby, its wake arriving as a gentle pulse against the gondola's side. The gondola answers with a barely perceptible sway, like it's nodding. The ripples spread, soften, and disappear into the fog, as if the canal absorbs disturbance the way a good bed absorbs you, shifting just enough, then settling back into stillness. You catch another fragment of the city, a low doorway with stone steps descending directly into the canal, edges darkened by years of tide. You imagine mornings where someone steps down carefully with a bucket, or ties a boat with quick, practiced hands, or simply pauses to watch the water and remember that time moves whether you sprint or not. Your mind tries to attach a story to every glimpse. You let it, but you keep the stories light, like feathers. Nothing heavy is allowed on this boat. As the gondola continues, you stop measuring progress by distance and start measuring it by comfort. The fog isn't clearing in a dramatic reveal, and that's fine. Your pulse is quieter. Your thoughts are less sharp. The oar keeps whispering, the water keeps remembering, and your breath keeps following, as if your whole body is being coached into a gentler tempo, one slow stroke at a time. The tempo holds, steady as a heartbeat you no longer have to force. The gondola slips onward, and the fog begins to thin in small, teasing patches, not enough to give you certainty, just enough to offer glimpses that feel like rewards for staying calm. You don't chase the clearer air. You let it come to you the way sleep comes when you finally stop checking the clock. A bridge appears ahead, low and rounded, its underside a dark curve hovering above the canal. For a moment it looks like a doorway into a softer world, which is ironic because you're already in one. The stones are damp and slightly glossy, as if the bridge has been drinking fog for breakfast. You drift closer, and the air under it feels cooler, heavier, like a shallow cave. As you pass beneath, the sound changes. The water's lap becomes a little louder, the oar's whisper gains a faint echo, and your own breathing feels amplified, intimate. It's the kind of acoustic shift that makes you instinctively quiet down further, not because anyone told you to, but because the space itself requests it. You tilt your head slightly, watching the bridge's underside slide overhead, stone blocks fitted together with old confidence. On the far side, the canal opens into a small junction, and the fog loosens again. To your left, a narrow alley of water disappears between tall buildings. To your right, another canal bends away, marked by striped poles and the faint glow of a lamp that hasn't yet decided the morning has arrived. Straight ahead, the canal continues, but now you can make out a bit more of the city's waking body. You notice the first locals, quiet shapes moving along the stone edges, their footsteps soft, their movements economical. No one is loud. No one is performing mourning for an audience. They walk with the kind of familiarity that comes from living in a place where the streets are water and the shortcuts are bridges. Someone carries a small bundle tucked close, possibly bread, possibly laundry, possibly the day's work compressed into something manageable. A figure pauses near a doorway, adjusting something at water level, maybe a rope, maybe a latch, hands moving with calm precision. They don't look at you like you're an intruder. They don't stare the way tourists sometimes do, wide-eyed and hungry for proof that life here is authentic. They treat your passing the way you treat a slow cloud drifting across the sky, noticed, accepted, then released. And yet, in their quiet neutrality, there's a kind of welcome, a shared understanding that morning is fragile and shouldn't be poked too hard. You drift past a small dock where a wooden boat is tied, rocking gently. The dock boards are damp, darkened by years of tide and touch. A few crates sit stacked near a door, their corners softened by use. Someone has placed them in a way that suggests routine, not chaos, like they've done this 1,000 times and plan to do it 1,000 more, barring the universe's occasional tantrums. Above the canal, windows begin to show signs of life. A curtain shifts, a shutter sits half open, as if someone couldn't decide between privacy and curiosity. You catch the faint glow of an interior lamp, warm and honey-colored against the cool gray outside. That contrast feels intimate, almost tender. Venice offering small pockets of warmth inside its damp stone body. The gondola glides toward another bridge, slightly higher, with a gentler arch. As you approach, you see a person on the bridge, just a silhouette at first, then clearer as the fog thins. They pause near the center, leaning on the stone railing, looking down at the canal, not at you specifically, but at the water, as if checking the city's pulse. They stand still, unhurried, in a posture that says, yes, the water is still here, the day is still coming, nothing is urgently on fire. A rare luxury. You slip beneath that bridge too, and again the sound shifts, soft echo, then release. On the other side, the canal narrows slightly, and the buildings feel closer, taller. The fog clings to their upper floors, hiding rooftops and chimneys. You see brickwork in deep red, plaster in pale cream, occasional patches where time has peeled away the surface to reveal older layers beneath. Venice wears its age openly. It doesn't get Botox. It just gets tide stains and keeps going. A faint smell drifts in. Yeast, maybe, or coffee, or something being warmed in a kitchen. It's subtle, but it hooks your attention the way comfort always does. Your stomach doesn't growl, it simply acknowledges. You realize how rarely you let yourself notice small, gentle cues in daily life. Usually you bulldoze past them because there's always a next task, a next message, a next demand. Here, you have nothing to bulldoze towards. You are drifting, and the city is letting you. A small boat moves in the distance, barely visible, its shape emerging and dissolving in the mist. It leaves a wake that travels towards you like a slow ripple of news. The gondola meets it with a soft sway, then steadies. You don't tense. You trust the boat's balance now. You trust the water's patience. You trust that the locals, moving quietly along the edges of the canal, have lived with this rhythm for generations, and that their calm has seeped into the stone and water around you. As you continue, you feel something shift inside you, an internal bridge, perhaps, arching gently from the anxious part of you to the quieter part that has always been waiting. You pass under stone, through fog, beside waking lives, and you begin to understand. Venice in the morning doesn't just show you beauty, it teaches you how to move through softness without fear. You drift onward with the feeling that the city has quietly agreed to carry you, and the canal begins to widen into a busier artery, though busy in Venice at this hour is still a soft word. The fog thins in strips, like a curtain being pulled aside by someone who doesn't want to make noise. Ahead, the air changes first, richer, warmer, more edible, before your eyes fully understand why. It starts with bread. Not the dramatic social media kind of bread that looks like it needs a personal trainer, but the honest kind. Warm loaves wrapped in paper, crusts that crack softly as they cool, the faint sweetness of yeast rising into damp air. The scent floats across the canal and finds you the way comfort always finds you, quietly, insistently, without asking whether you're ready to receive. Your body answers before your thoughts do. Your shoulders drop another millimeter. Your stomach recognizes civilization. The gondola glides toward a cluster of stone steps descending into the water. In Venice, steps are rarely just steps. They are loading docks, thresholds, meeting points, places where the city hands things back and forth between land and canal. Here, the steps carry the earliest commerce of the day: crates, baskets, bundles tied with twine. Some are stacked neatly against walls darkened by tide stains. Others are already in motion, lifted and carried with the practiced ease of people who have done this in fog, rain, and in different winter mornings. You see locals moving through the mist like silhouettes cut from routine. Their clothing is practical, layered, made for damp air and heavy work. They don't rush, but they don't drift either. They have that steady tempo of people who respect time without worshiping it. A small boat noses up to the steps and bumps softly, wood on stone, then steadies. Hands appear, gloved, strong and efficient, passing crates upward. No one needs to announce what they're doing. The choreography is old and unspoken. As you float closer, the market reveals itself in pieces: an awning's edge, a row of tables, the faint geometry of stalls lining a covered walkway. The fog still softens everything, turning sharp corners into gentle suggestions, but the market's life is unmistakable. This is where morning doesn't just arrive, it gets assembled. The smells layer in like a slow symphony. Bread remains the lead, warm, grounding. Then coffee slips in, darker and more bitter, followed by the clean brightness of citrus. Somewhere fish adds its own blunt note, not unpleasant, just honest. Venice doesn't pretend the sea is polite. It feeds you and then reminds you where the feeding comes from. Your gondola eases along the edge of the market area, and the water carries small reflections: gold from lanterns, pale from stone, faint colors from produce stacked under canvas. You watch as a vendor lays out fruit with careful spacing, as if arranging a still life rather than preparing for sales. Oranges glow like small suns against the gray morning. Artichokes sit like armored flowers. Leafy greens shine with moisture, catching the weak light in a way that makes them look freshly painted. A person notices you, not with surprise, but with that calm acknowledgement Venetians seem to offer by default, as if they're saying, "Yes, you're here. No, we're not going to make it weird." They lift one hand in a gentle guiding motion toward the stalls, a wordless invitation. You don't need translation. Your body understands hospitality when it's offered without pressure. The gondola slows near another set of steps, and you step out carefully onto stone that feels cool and slightly slick underfoot. The market is close enough now that you can hear it, the soft scrape of crates, the rustle of paper, the muted clink of metal scales being adjusted. There's no shouting, no theatrical bargaining. The day is still too young for performance. This is the market before the market, work before spectacle. You walk along the covered walkway where stalls begin to fill. Overhead, beams and awnings create a sheltered corridor, and the fog beyond the market's edge makes everything feel enclosed, intimate. Locals move around you like currents in a canal, flowing, adjusting, never colliding. Someone carries a tray of small pastries dusted with sugar, their surface catching light like frost. Another stacks bread in a way that suggests pride without arrogance, loaves aligned, ends facing outward, as if each one deserves to be seen. You pause near a table where fish lies on crushed ice. Even here, in the soft hush, there's something bracing about it. The sea laid open, silvery and still, a reminder that Venice lives on water not just romantically, but practically. A vendor's hands move quickly, arranging, cleaning, smoothing. The gestures are precise, economic, almost meditative. You watch without flinching, not because you've suddenly become fearless, but because the calm around you keeps your nervous system from turning everything into a crisis. A small problem tries to form in your mind, the familiar itch to do something useful, to buy something, to justify your presence with an action. But the locals don't demand that. They simply let you be near. A person points subtly toward a basket of bread rolls, then toward a small paper bag, miming the simple idea of taking warmth with you. Their eyes are kind, neutral, intrusive. You accept the suggestion with a small nod that feels like joining the morning rather than consuming it. You hold the paper bag in your hands. It's warm through the thin paper, and the warmth seeps into your fingers, into your chest, into that part of you that has been cold with overstimulation for too long. You take a slow bite, and the crust gives way with a soft crackle. The inside is tender, slightly sweet, faintly salty from the air. It tastes like the kind of care that doesn't announce itself. Around you, the market continues waking. Crates empty, tables fill, people move with quiet purpose. You realize that this, too, is history, not the loud kind with banners and battles, but the daily kind that keeps a city alive. Bread baked before dawn, fish brought in by boat, fruit arranged with patient hands, routines repeated until they become a culture. You turn back toward the canal, the gondola waiting like a black comma in the gray sentence of morning. With the warmth of bread still in your hands, you step in again, and the city resumes its gentle drift, fed, steadied, and strangely comforted by the simple fact that someone, somewhere, woke up early to make this softness possible. You carry the market's warmth with you, the paper bag now lighter, the last crumbs settling in your palm like tiny, edible souvenirs. As the gondola pulls away, the scent of yeast fades into the fog, and the canal returns to its cooler palette. Damp stone, brackish air, and that steady whisper of wood meeting water. The oar keeps time with a patience that feels almost rude compared to how you usually move through a morning, rushed, clenched, convinced everything is urgent. The canal threads onward, and Venice offers a different kind of warmth ahead, less comforting, more elemental. It arrives first as a faint amber stain on the water, the way sunrise colors a puddle before you ever see the sky. You follow it without deciding to. The gondola glides into narrower water where buildings lean closer, their lower bricks dark with tide marks, their upper stories softened into milk-gray mist. Somewhere nearby, fire is awake. The amber glow strengthens and brings a new sound, subtle, delicate, distinct from the canal's lap. A faint clink like something fragile being set down with care. Then another. You begin to see a doorway lit from within, its light spilling across the water in a trembling ribbon. The fog turns the glow into a halo, as if the city is hiding a small sun behind a wall. The gondola eases near a low landing. Stone steps descend into the canal, worn smooth by years of shoes and tide. A local presence waits nearby, not blocking you, not hurrying you, simply there. A hand lifts in a gentle guiding motion toward the lit doorway. No words, no performance, just an invitation delivered in the Venetian way, understated and calm. You step out carefully. The stone is cool under your soles, a little slick with mist, and the canal's air follows you up the steps. Then you cross the threshold, and the world changes immediately. Heat folds around you, soft at first, then insistent, the kind that reaches into your chest and loosens something you didn't realize you were holding. The smell shifts too, mineral, smoky, faintly metallic, with a clean sharpness that suggests transformation rather than comfort. Your eyes adjust from gray to gold. Light here is not borrowed from sky or lantern, it is born from fire. A furnace breathes at the heart of the room. It doesn't roar theatrically, it hums, alive and steady, a contained power that makes you respect it without fearing it. The opening glows white-hot at the center, shading outward into orange, then amber, then shadow. Heat shimmers above it, bending straight lines into gentle waves, as if reality has been nudged into softness. Tools rest nearby, long rods, wooden paddles, heavy shears. Shelves hold finished pieces and experiments, bowls, small ornaments, a vase with a neck like a swan, each catching the furnace glow in its own way. Some are clear as frozen water, others carry colors that feel impossibly Venetian, lagoon greens, deep canal blues, pale sunrise amber. A craftsperson moves with controlled economy. They dip the end of a long rod into the furnace and turn it slowly, steadily. When the rod emerges, a gather of molten glass clings to it, glowing like captured dawn, heavy and alive. Rotation keeps it centered. Gravity tries to claim it. The rotation refuses, calmly. The shaping begins, hypnotic in its restraint. The rod turns, the glass tightens, stretches, settles. A wooden paddle touches the glowing surface with a gentleness that feels intimate, smoothing it without bruising it. The shears snip a trailing strand, and the sound is small and decisive, like punctuation placed exactly right. The warm form rolls briefly on a metal surface, a faint hiss rising as heat meets cooler air. No one speaks. Coordination happens through timing. A tool appears when needed. Hands withdraw when space is required. A slight change of stance signals a shift in pace. Silence isn't awkward here. It is structural, the container that lets attention stay whole. You notice how the glass holds light differently as it cools. In the furnace, it is pure glow. Outside, it becomes translucent, then clear, then reflective. It teaches a slow lesson. Transformation doesn't stop when the dramatic part ends. Even after the heat, there is the quiet work of settling into a new shape. Near the bench sits a small finished piece, a bead-sized orb with a spiral of blue inside, like a tiny whirlpool captured mid-turn. You lean closer, careful not to intrude. The object answers by catching the gold light and giving it back as softened rays. It looks meant to be held, not displayed. Beauty here isn't shouting, it's humming. The craftsperson carries the still warm form toward a protected area where it can cool slowly, sheltered from sudden drafts. You feel in your own body how much restraint is built into this work. If you cool it too fast, it cracks. If you rush the shaping, it collapses. If you force it, it resists. Glass is honest like that. It doesn't reward impatience. It simply records it. When you step back outside, the fog greets you again, cool against your warmed cheeks. The canal looks darker after the golden room, but it also looks gentler, as if your eyes have learned a new softness. You return to the gondola carrying no trophy, no proof for the world, just the sensation of heat, craft, and light made solid. The oar dips, the water answers, and you drift on, calmer than before, as if something inside you has been shaped and set, and now only needs time to cool. The furnace's warmth stays with you longer than you expect, like a small ember tucked behind your ribs, and it changes how you read the fog. The gray no longer feels cold or blank. It feels like paper waiting for ink. As the gondola slips away from the workshop glow, the canal returns to its muted palette, but you keep catching faint gold in the water, afterimages that tremble, then fade. You pass under another bridge, low enough that you instinctively lower your chin. On the far side, the canal tightens into a quieter vein. Buildings lean in, close enough that you could almost touch brick with one hand and plaster with the other. The gondola makes a soft turn, and a narrow opening appears, an unassuming gap between facades, a slice of darkness that looks like it leads nowhere. It's exactly the sort of entrance you would normally ignore because it doesn't advertise itself. You've been trained to chase neon arrows and top 10 lists, as if the world only exists in curated highlights. Here, the gondola glides into the gap anyway, and you don't protest. You've already learned that Venice's best offerings arrive quietly, like sleep when you finally stop checking the clock. Inside, the air changes. The fog thins as if it has found a place to rest. Sound dampens further. The water turns glassy, dark, and calm. The passage opens into a small courtyard basin, enclosed on all sides by buildings that rise like quiet guardians. In the center sits a wellhead, stone, circular, worn smooth at the edges, once the heart of daily survival. Even if it no longer serves its original purpose, it still holds the weight of repetition and care. Above you, laundry lines stretch between windows like soft bridges. Shirts, towels, and sheets hang in the damp air, pale fabrics absorbing the weak morning light, darker fabrics anchoring it. Some pieces sway slightly, not from wind, but from the faint movement of air through the courtyard, like a slow exhale. Domestic life floats overhead, honest and unembarrassed. In this city, normality is allowed to be visible. A local presence moves near the wellhead with the unhurried confidence of belonging. A basket rests on the stone, and hands sort clothespins with practiced economy. The person glances at you once, neutral, calm, and then returns to the task. The welcome is subtle. You are permitted to be here without needing to buy anything, prove anything, or turn the moment into content. You walk slowly because fast walking would feel like shouting. Your footsteps echo softly and then disappear into the hush. You notice the walls up close, plaster uneven and patched, tide-stained near the ground, beautiful because it refuses perfection. A potted plant sits on a windowsill, leaves catching tiny beads of mist. An iron balcony curls outward with a floral pattern, dark metal softened by age. A curtain hangs half open, and behind it a dim lamp glows, warm against the coolness outside. Somewhere, a cat crosses the courtyard with the lazy authority of an old resident, paws silent on damp stone. It pauses, looks at you with mild indifference, and continues on, as if the courtyard has already approved you. You watch it and feel your mind quiet further. Even your thoughts begin to move like that cat, slow, unbothered, not trying to impress anyone. The laundry shifts again. A sheet is lifted, unfolded, and hung with 2 clothespins. The sound is soft, a single breath of fabric. The person smooths the edge, then moves on to the next piece, as steady as the gondola's oar. You realize you've spent too much of your life treating care as an emergency project, something you do only when you're forced to. Here, care is routine. Care is weather. You circle the wellhead and let your fingers hover above the stone, close enough to feel its coolness without touching. Shallow grooves mark the surface, evidence of ropes and buckets, of hands repeating the same motions for generations. The thought lands gently. History is not only monuments, it is laundry. It is bread baked before dawn. It is glass turned in steady circles until it holds light. It is people doing small tasks well, over and over, until the city learns to breathe. When you step back into the gondola, it feels like returning to a slow sentence paused mid-thought. The boat shifts, then steadies beneath you. You push off, and the courtyard begins to recede, framed by the narrow passage like a secret kept on purpose. As the gondola slips back into the canal's fog, you keep one last image, sheets hanging like soft sails, the wellhead anchored at the center, and the quiet promise that even a city built on water can still find ways to dry, to warm, to rest. The canal takes you back into its wider breadth, and for a while you float in that in-between state where the city feels both inhabited and asleep. The fog keeps its soft grip on everything above the waterline, and the gondola's motion stays so even that time stops behaving like a boss with a whistle. You are no longer on your way. You are simply moving, which is a subtle but deeply healing difference. Then the bells begin. At first, you think it's just your mind doing that thing it does when it finally relaxes, manufacturing phantom sounds to fill the silence, like a child humming so it won't feel alone. But the notes return, low and patient, a measured toll that rolls through the mist rather than cutting through it. The fog doesn't resist. It receives the sound and carries it outward, smoothing the edges, turning each bell stroke into something rounded and gentle. The gondola follows the direction of the sound as if it's tied to it by an invisible thread. You drift past a facade where stone faces watch the canal, their features softened by age and damp air. You pass under another bridge, and for a moment the bell sound thickens, echoes stacking quietly, then releases again as you emerge. The notes feel less like an announcement and more like a slow reminder. The morning is here. The city remembers how to begin. Ahead, a larger shape materializes, the faint outline of a church front, pale against gray, its edges dissolving into fog, like a sketch still being drawn. A lantern glows near an entrance, casting a small pool of light on damp stone. The door is open just enough to suggest welcome without insisting on it. No one stands outside calling you in. The invitation is quieter than that. It's simply space. The gondola eases toward a landing. A local presence is there, not looming, not theatrical, just a person who moves with the calm economy you've started to recognize as the city's native language. A hand lifts slightly, palm open, guiding you toward the steps. The gesture is so minimal, it almost feels like you imagined it. But your feet obey anyway, stepping from boat to stone with care, because even your body seems to understand that this is not a place for clumsy urgency. Inside, the air changes instantly. The damp chill of the canal gives way to a cooler stillness that feels clean rather than cold. The light is dim, honeyed in small patches where candles burn, and the rest is shadow shaped by arches. Stone and marble hold the morning quietly, absorbing sound, slowing it down. Your footsteps soften, then disappear. Even your breathing feels too loud for a second, and you instinctively slow it, as if your lungs have manners. You move forward, and the details gather around you like a hush becoming visible. Polished marble underfoot, worn smooth in the center where countless feet have passed. Columns rising into darkness, faint gold in mosaics catching candlelight in tiny flashes. The air smells faintly of wax and old wood, with a trace of incense that clings to the space like memory. This is a room designed to hold time, not chase it. A caretaker moves near the side, hands busy with small, quiet tasks. They adjust a candle, straighten a cloth, smooth a corner that doesn't need smoothing, except that care is part of the ritual. No words, just the soft language of maintenance, the kind that keeps sacred spaces from becoming museums. They glance at you once, and there is no judgment in it, only recognition, another human arriving with tiredness, looking for something gentle. You pause near a line of votive candles. Some are freshly lit, flames steady and small, as if they are practicing being brave without showing off. Others are burned down, wax pooled and cooled in rippled layers. You can't know the stories behind each flame, what was asked for, what was thanked for, what was mourned quietly, but you don't need to. The presence of the candles is enough to teach you that people have always needed a place to put their worry down for a moment. The bells outside toll again, softer now, as if the sound is bowing when it enters. You look up, and see the faint suggestion of a high window, fog-muted daylight filtering through. Venice is still hiding its face, but it allows this light, a little, carefully, like someone opening curtains without waking the house. The caretaker's hands make another small gesture, guiding you toward a side aisle. You follow. Here, paintings and statues sit in the shadow, saints with gentle eyes, hands raised in blessing or holding symbols of their lives. The artistry isn't trying to shock you, it's trying to steady you. You feel the same restrained patience you saw in the glass workshop, the slow shaping of something fragile into something that can endure. You notice how Venice does devotion in its own particular way, surrounded by water, always aware of tides, always living with damp stone and the sea's insistence. Even inside a church, the city's relationship to water is present. Some floors sit slightly uneven, subtly adjusted over centuries. Some lower walls show faint marks where moisture has climbed. Nothing is pristine, everything is tended. When you step back outside, the fog wraps around you again, but it feels softer now, as if the church lent it a calmer texture. The gondola waits at the steps, patient, unbothered. As you settle in, the bell sound fades behind you, not gone, just receding into the mist, like a thought that no longer needs to shout to be heard. The oar dips, the water answers, and you drift on with a new kind of quiet in your chest, one that feels less like emptiness and more like space finally cleared for rest. The canal narrows again, as if Venice is guiding you into its more private thoughts. The church's stillness lingers in your posture. You sit a little straighter, not from tension, but from a quiet respect for the morning. The bells fade into the fog behind you, replaced by smaller sounds, water brushing stone, the gondola's hull whispering forward, an occasional faint clink from a mooring ring. You slip into a slender passage where the buildings feel close enough to press their stories into your skin. Doorways appear at water level, some with steps that vanish into the canal as if the city expects you to arrive by boat in your dreams. Many doors are closed, paint softened by damp air, edges worn where hands have touched them for decades. Others sit slightly ajar, revealing darkness inside and the suggestion of warmth deeper in. It's not dramatic, it's just life continuing behind wood and stone. The water here is darker, less reflective, as if it's holding secrets. The fog above is thinner now, but it still clings to upper floors, erasing rooftops and making the canal feel like a corridor carved through a half-remembered painting. You watch as the gondola passes so close to a wall that you can see individual bricks, their surfaces mottled and uneven, mortar lines softened by time. Tide stains creep upward in faint bands, evidence of the lagoon's slow insistence. A local presence appears ahead, walking along a narrow stone edge that runs beside the canal like a careful sidewalk. Their steps are small, balanced, practiced. They carry a bundle, maybe groceries, maybe tools, held close so it won't brush the damp wall. They move with a confidence that doesn't announce itself. Venice has taught people to live with narrowness, with water, with the constant need to pay attention without panicking. They glance at you, then lift one hand in a small guiding motion toward a feature you might miss, a wooden plank laid between two stones, forming a tiny bridge across a puddle in the walkway. It's simple, temporary, practical, one of those everyday inventions that never gets photographed because it's too honest to be content. The gesture says, "This is how we do it, this is how we adapt, this is how we keep moving." You nod, not because you have to, but because your body feels grateful for kindness delivered without fuss. The gondola glides past a doorway with a brass handle worn shiny. Above it, a small window is open a crack. A faint scent drifts out. Soap, perhaps, or coffee, or warm air from a room where someone is finally waking. You imagine a kitchen inside, tiled and small, with a pot on the stove, and a person moving quietly, careful not to wake someone else. No dialogue, no drama, just the choreography of morning care. You begin to notice how Venice lives with water as a neighbor rather than an enemy. The city doesn't pretend the canal won't rise. It accepts, plans, adjusts. Some entrances have raised thresholds, some have removable boards, some have hooks and rings set into stone for tying boats at different tide levels. The infrastructure is humble but clever, built from long experience rather than one big, brilliant plan. It's a city that learned survival through many small decisions repeated well. In one corner, a narrow doorway sits directly at water level, and a small boat is tied beside it, rocking gently. The boat's paint is chipped, its wood darkened by damp, but it holds itself with dignity. The rope is looped neatly, not because someone is trying to impress you, but because neatness is a form of respect. Respect for the boat, the canal, and the fact that you will need this knot to hold when the tide changes its mind. A local presence near the boat gestures again, this time toward the waterline itself, where tiny ripples tap the stone. Their hand traces a small upward motion, then a downward one, as if showing you the daily breathing of the lagoon. You understand without needing explanation. The water rises and falls, and everyone here lives in relationship with that rhythm. It's not romantic, it's just real. And somehow, reality in this form feels soothing rather than harsh. The gondola slips under a very low arch, a tiny bridge connecting two buildings. The space is so narrow that the sound of the oar changes, more echo, more closeness. You feel enclosed for a moment, and your mind tries to label it as claustrophobia, as danger, as something to solve. But the gondola passes through with ease. The water keeps moving. The canal opens again. Your body learns another lesson. Enclosure isn't always threat. Sometimes it's shelter. On the far side, the canal widens just enough to reveal a small square, stone steps rising to a quiet landing, a simple facade with a faded fresco, a single lamppost still burning as if it hasn't received the memo that daylight exists. A person sweeps the stone with slow strokes, gathering damp leaves into a small pile. The act is almost absurd, sweeping in a city that will be damp again in minutes, but it is also deeply human. You sweep because you can. You tidy because it makes the world feel more manageable. You do small tasks as a way of telling your nervous system, we are still here, we still care. You glide past and feel something settle in you. Venice's hidden doorways, its water-kissed steps, its humble adaptations, these are not just quaint details, they are a philosophy. Live with what changes, prepare without panic, keep your knots neat, sweep your little corner, let the water rise and fall without making it personal. The gondola carries you onward, and the fog continues thinning in gentle increments. You can see farther now, still softened, still dreamlike, but less erased. The city is revealing itself slowly, as if it trusts you more with each quiet canal you pass. And you, in return, feel yourself becoming the kind of traveler who doesn't demand clarity all at once, someone willing to be guided by subtle gestures, by water's rhythm, by the unspoken hospitality of a place that has learned to endure. The city keeps revealing itself in slow increments, as if it's testing whether you can handle beauty without turning it into a checklist. You glide past another row of water-level doors, another sweep of damp stone, another quiet gesture from someone who belongs here. And just when you begin to feel a little too confident, when your body starts thinking, yes, I could live like this, I could be this calm, I could become the sort of person who doesn't panic at the first inconvenience, Venice does what it always does. It changes the conditions. The fog thickens again, not with drama, but with decision. One moment you can see the next bend in the canal, the striped mooring poles spaced like gentle markers. The next moment, the distance collapses. Gray swallows detail. The far walls vanish. Even the water seems darker, as if it has turned down its own reflection to match the mood. Your first instinct is the old one, to tighten, to scan, to problem solve at high speed. You feel your mind reach for control the way a hand reaches for a railing on unfamiliar stairs. The canal is suddenly less like a corridor and more like a question. Where are you now? Which turn did you take? What's ahead? How far until the open water returns? The gondola responds to the thickened fog with a subtle slowing, as if it too understands that speed is not bravery. The oar's whisper becomes more deliberate. Each stroke arrives with a fraction more care, a fraction more pause between movements. The hull glides forward and then rests, glides forward and then rests, like the boat is listening for something, an echo, a current shift, a familiar pattern in the water. Your eyes try to anchor on landmarks, but the fog refuses to cooperate. A facade appears on your right and dissolves before you can read its shape. A bridge outline materializes overhead and then disappears behind you like a memory you didn't quite catch. The usual cues, lamp glow, window lines, the slight widening of a junction, blur into one continuous softness. You realize, with a small twist in your stomach, that you are no longer sure which canal you're in. It's not the cinematic kind of lost. No ominous music, no dramatic gasp, just an uncomfortable absence of certainty, which, let's be honest, might actually be your greatest horror. You can survive deadlines, awkward meetings, and the emotional trauma of unanswered messages, but ambiguity? That's the monster under the bed for modern brains. The gondola drifts toward what you think is a junction, but the fog makes it hard to confirm. You see a faint widening, then question whether it's just the fog's texture changing. The water's surface looks different here, slightly more restless, small ripples moving at an angle that suggests a current crossing the canal rather than flowing neatly along it. The gondola adjusts with a quiet sway, and you feel the boat's balance shift under you, subtle but real. A striped pole appears suddenly out of the mist, closer than expected. The gondola passes it with barely a hand's breadth to spare. Your pulse jumps, then settles, embarrassed at how quickly it wanted to declare an emergency. The boat doesn't jerk, it doesn't flinch, it simply continues, correcting its line with a calm you envy. You notice how the fog changes sound as well as sight. The world becomes smaller, close noises feel closer, far noises vanish entirely. A distant boat's engine, if one exists, doesn't reach you. The faint clink of a mooring ring is swallowed. Even gulls seem to have agreed to keep quiet. It's as if Venice has placed you inside a padded room, not to trap you, but to force you into listening to subtler things. Water pressure, echo, the faint scrape of stone when the hull passes too near. The gondola rounds a bend, at least you think it's a bend, and the canal narrows further. Walls press in. The space ahead looks darker. The fog becomes so dense that the end of the canal is indistinguishable from the air itself. Your body registers the narrowing with a familiar unease, not fear exactly, but that small animal urge to find an exit. Then the gondola slows even more, almost hovering. You realize you might be drifting into a dead-end canal, one of those quiet cul-de-sacs where the water stops and the city's stone simply rises. Or perhaps it's not a dead end, but a service canal where deliveries tuck in, where boats turn around carefully, where there's no reason for you to be unless you know exactly what you're doing. The boat's measured pace begins to feel less like romance and more like caution. A faint knock of wood against stone reaches you, soft, controlled, then nothing. The gondola steadies, the oar dips again, gently, and the boat inches forward as if testing depth. The water here feels heavier, less open. You imagine, without wanting to, the hidden complications beneath the surface: silt, steps, submerged edges, the lagoon's slow rearranging of the city's foundation. Venice doesn't sit on solid ground the way most places do. It floats on agreement between wood and water, between tide and stone, between human routine and the sea's indifferent breathing. A small practical worry rises. What if you can't find the way back out quickly? What if the fog stays thick and the canals keep splitting into choices you can't verify? What if you have to wait, actually wait, without scrolling, without updates, without any proof of progress? Your mind tries to label this as inconvenience. Your body labels it as vulnerability. And Venice, politely, does not care about your labels. You breathe in slowly, tasting damp air and a faint mineral tang from the stone. You breathe out longer than you want to, because your body is learning a new rule: panic wastes oxygen. The gondola remains steady beneath you, a thin line of stability in a world that has blurred its edges. Somewhere ahead, a dim light flickers, maybe a lamp near a doorway, maybe a reflection you can't trust. You can't tell if it marks a path or a trap, which is exactly why the fog feels like a test. Not a cruel one, a quiet one. Can you stay gentle when you don't know? The gondola drifts on, slower now, as if the city has lowered its voice and is waiting to see whether you'll lower yours too. You stay with your breath the way you stay with a handrail in a dark stairwell, lightly, without crushing it. The fog has tightened the world into a small, damp room, and your mind keeps trying to redecorate with panic. You let it try. You don't let it win. The gondola hovers as if it is listening, and you begin to listen too, not with your eyes, but with everything else you usually ignore. Water tells you the first truth. In the broader canals, the surface carries a lazy pulse, a wide-chested inhale and exhale. Here, the current presses sideways under the hull, as if two streams cross and disagree. The gondola answers with tiny corrections, micro-turns, half-pauses, like a needle finding a groove. You notice the tug strengthens on one side and eases on the other. The gentler stream feels like an exit. Echo tells you the second truth. When the hull drifts close to stone, the water's lap returns fast, boxed in by narrow space. When the gondola slides away, the sound lengthens and loosens. Under a low bridge, every noise rounds itself and comes back softly. Beyond the arch, the echo thins again. That change is a breadcrumb. Smell fills in what sight refuses. The fog hides landmarks, but it cannot hide the air's flavor. Brine and wet stone dominate until a faint thread of woody smoke appears, someone lighting a stove behind thick walls. It comes from one direction, then fades when you turn your head. Your body notes it without argument. The gondola inches forward, cautious without being afraid. Your thoughts try to declare an emergency because they are addicted to certainty. You watch that urge rise, then soften. Even if you are unsure, the water is still water, the fog is still fog, and your breath is still available. A small sound arrives, wood tapping wood, controlled, not frantic. It repeats once more, followed by the gentle push of a wake brushing your hull. Another boat is near. In thick fog, that could be alarming, but the sound carries steadiness, the kind that belongs to routine. A silhouette forms ahead, low and practical, a workboat riding close to the water. A person stands aboard with the posture of someone who learned balance from slick stones and shifting tides. They scan the canal edges, head turning slightly as if reading the space by feel. They slow, sharing the same pocket of gray with you. A striped mooring pole appears beside them, then another. The person lifts a hand and points, not at you, but at the water curling around the nearest pole. Their finger traces a small motion, inward, then outward, showing how the current folds and releases. You watch ripples wrap the wood and slip away in a particular direction, like a ribbon tugged downstream. The gesture is so quiet it barely disturbs the air, yet it lands in you with clarity. The gondola responds. The oar makes one careful stroke, then another. The hull slides toward the gentler stream the person indicated. Immediately, the motion feels less confused. The sideways push weakens. The boat straightens as if it has found a moving walkway hidden under the fog. Your shoulders soften, almost surprised, as though your body has been waiting for permission to trust again. You keep aligning with what your senses confirm. The echo opens a little. The air feels less dense on your skin. A faint scent returns, coffee, distant but undeniable, like the city's waking breath leaking through alleys and door cracks. Smell becomes a compass more honest than thought. The workboat continues on its route, and you find yourself matching its line. Each time the canal hints at splitting, the boat's wake answers before your uncertainty blooms. You track the soft V in the water and let the gondola settle into the same rhythm. Stroke and glide, stroke and glide. A bridge outline appears overhead again, darker than the fog around it. Under the arch, the water's sound rounds itself and returns close. Beyond it, the canal opens and the echo releases. The air feels looser. The fog thins in gentle patches, revealing a faint line of windows and the suggestion of a broader junction ahead. Then, very far away, a bell toll reaches you, softened into a vibration. It confirms what your senses have been collecting. You are turning back toward larger spaces, toward arteries where sound travels farther and life hums a little louder. The workboat takes a turn and slips back into gray, returning to its quiet tasks. There is no farewell performance, only separation by route, which feels appropriate. You carry the help the way you carried warm bread earlier, not as a debt, but as a small human kindness absorbed into your morning. You exhale, long and unforced. The small problem has not been conquered with heroics. It has been dissolved with attention, water patterns, echo shifts, air flavors, and a single wordless gesture that kept the silence intact. The gondola continues, steady and sure, and you drift onward, knowing that when the world blurs, you can still find your way by feel. The canal breathes wider around you again, and the fog, still present, feels less like a wall and more like a veil. You can sense space returning, and with it the gentle hum of a city resuming its morning routines. The water's surface looks calmer now, less cross-pressured, more aligned with a single direction. Even your body aligns, your shoulders settle, your jaw unclenches. The simple fact of being oriented feels like a small miracle, and you don't overthink it, because overthinking is exactly how you get lost in the first place. As the gondola glides, you begin noticing the tide in a more deliberate way, not as a poetic metaphor, though Venice will happily give you that, but as an active force shaping daily life. The waterline marks on the buildings become clearer in the thinning fog. Faint bands, darkened stone, subtle discolorations where the lagoon has climbed and retreated thousands of times. The city wears those marks the way a working person wears calluses, evidence of adaptation, not failure. You pass a doorway protected by a raised threshold, stone steps lifted slightly higher than its neighbors. Another entrance has a set of hooks and grooves on either side, designed to hold removable boards when water rises. You can almost see the routine. Water forecast checked, boards installed, rugs rolled up, furniture lifted on blocks. Not panic, procedure. Venice doesn't fight the tide like it's an enemy that can be defeated once and for all. It treats it like weather, respected, prepared for, lived with. A small public space appears here, stone paving, a low wall, a narrow landing where boats can pull in. Here you see the tide's lesson in action. A local presence stands near a stack of wooden planks, the kind used to create temporary walkways when the water creeps into streets. Their hands move slowly, checking each plank's condition, smoothing a rough edge, stacking them with care. It's maintenance without drama, the kind that keeps a city functional in the face of slow, persistent change. Nearby, another person adjusts a pair of tall rubber boots resting by a door, their shape familiar and unromantic. Boots here are not a fashion statement, they're a relationship contract with the lagoon. You catch the faint sheen of dampness on the paving stones and imagine how quickly it can turn from slightly wet to ankle-deep inconvenience when the tide decides to show off. The gondola drifts past a small boat loaded with supplies, tools, ropes, a folded tarp. Its owner checks knots with quick, practiced fingers, tightening and re-looping with the calm of someone who knows the tide will test every lazy tie. The rope work is neat, efficient, almost tender. The lesson repeats. In Venice, you survive by doing small things well, not once, but always. You feel the city's rhythm sharpen slightly as morning advances. More footsteps on stone, more boats moving with quiet purpose. A delivery boat slides by, its wake gentle, its path precise. A person on a narrow walkway pauses to let another pass, a small choreography of courtesy in a space where edges are tight. Even the fog seems to lift a little more, like it's finally satisfied that you're not going to demand instant clarity. The gondola carries you through a junction where the current changes texture, subtle acceleration, then a smoothing out. You remember the way you found your path earlier, by tracking pressure, echo, scent. Now you feel those clues more confidently, not as a desperate strategy, but as a kind of belonging. You're learning Venice's language, and it isn't spoken with words, it's spoken with tides. A larger open stretch appears ahead, and the canal's surface catches more light. The gray becomes brighter, with hints of pale gold filtering through the fog. You see facades more clearly now, ornate stonework, arched windows, balconies with curled iron. Yet the city remains softened, as if it refuses to show you everything at once. It's still teaching patience. At a low landing, you glimpse a small group moving wooden boards into place, aligning them carefully to create a walkway over a damp patch. Their movements are unhurried but precise. The boards fit together like a simple puzzle, and once laid, they become a temporary street. You watch how quickly an inconvenience becomes a solution when you treat it as routine rather than catastrophe. You think about your own life, how often you wait for one grand fix, one perfect plan, one dramatic turning point that will make everything stable. Venice quietly challenges that fantasy. The lagoon will keep rising and falling. The stone will keep dampening. The city will keep adjusting. Stability isn't the absence of change, it's the presence of practiced response. The gondola glides on, and you feel that lesson settle into your muscles. You don't need to control the tide to live well. You need to prepare, to notice, to keep your ropes tidy, to stack your planks, to meet what comes with calm procedure rather than panic. As the fog continues its slow retreat, the city looks less like a dream and more like a place where people do the work of staying afloat, literally and quietly, every single day. And in that steady, tide-shaped discipline, you find an unexpected kind of comfort. If Venice can endure with such gentleness, maybe you can too. The tide's lesson follows you like a soft hand at your back, steadying, not pushing. The gondola glides into an area where the canals feel slightly more social, not loud, just warmer, in the way a kitchen is warmer than a hallway. The fog has thinned enough that you can see light cooling beneath awnings and overhangs, and you catch the subtle signs of morning comfort: steam, glass fogged from within, the glow of a room that is awake for the simple purpose of feeding people. You drift toward a corner where stone steps rise to a narrow landing. A small establishment sits there, modest and unshowy, the kind of place that doesn't need to advertise because the locals already know it. The air carries the scent of coffee, deep, bitter, honest, and something sweet that suggests pastry just out of the oven. Your body responds in the quiet way it does when it recognizes safety. You swallow, you breathe deeper, you soften. A local presence near the landing makes a small guiding gesture again, like the city's hospitality has become a consistent background feature rather than a one-time favor. You step out of the gondola and onto the stone, which feels less slick now that the morning has warmed it by a fraction. The sound of your steps is still muted, but there's more life in the air, more gentle movement, more purpose. Inside, warmth wraps around you immediately. It's not furnace heat like the glass workshop. This is softer, domestic heat, generated by coffee machines, ovens, human bodies gathered close, and the simple fact that a space designed for comfort holds it well. The smell of espresso is rich and grounding. The pastry scent rides above it, buttery and faintly sweet, like an invitation you don't have to earn. The room is small. Tables sit close. A counter runs along one side, its surface worn in the places where hands have rested for years. Glass jars hold biscuits and small sweets, their shapes softened by the foggy morning light filtering through the window. The window itself is slightly misted, blurring the canal outside into pale gray. Here, the fog becomes decoration rather than obstacle. People move quietly, as if respecting the hour. A person wipes the counter with slow, practiced strokes, not because it's dirty, but because order is part of comfort. Another sets down cups with gentle precision. There is no dialogue, but the coordination is clear. Tasks performed with ease, without the frantic edge of modern hustle. No one is trying to optimize their morning. They are simply living it. You take a seat near the window. The chair is sturdy, slightly cool at first, then warming under you. You watch the canal through the glass, seeing the gondola wait outside like a patient punctuation mark in the sentence of the morning. Steam rises from a cup placed near you, espresso, dark and glossy. The surface trembles slightly, then settles. The smell is immediate and intimate, pulling your attention inward. You lift the cup and take a slow sip. The bitterness lands first, sharp and clean, then softens into warmth spreading through your chest. It's the kind of taste that wakes you without shouting. You feel it settle in your stomach, anchoring you the way the wellhead anchored the courtyard earlier, an ordinary object doing an important job. A small pastry is placed beside your cup, light, flaky, dusted with sugar that catches the dim light like frost. You break it gently. The layers crackle softly, a quiet sound that feels luxurious in a world where most noises are either too loud or too empty. You take a bite, and the sweetness is modest, balanced by butter and a faint hint of citrus. It tastes like someone's idea of kindness. As you eat, you notice the people around you, not in a voyeuristic way, but in the gentle way you watch waves, accepting their presence as part of the atmosphere. A person stands near the counter, hands wrapped around a cup, shoulders slightly hunched against the damp chill they carried in. Another sits at a small table, reading something folded, eyes calm. Someone else enters, shakes off a bit of mist from their coat, and moves with the ease of belonging. No one performs, no one rushes. The room hums with quiet rituals. Outside, you see a delivery boat glide by, wake spreading in soft ripples. The cafe's warmth makes the canal look even colder, but not in a threatening way, more like contrast, like the world reminding you that comfort is something you create, not something you wait to be granted. Venice creates it in small corners, a warm cup, a sweet bite, a room that holds you gently while fog drifts past the window. You let your gaze soften, your breath deepens, the caffeine settles into your bloodstream like a polite guest, not a loud intruder. Your thoughts slow further, becoming less like a swarm and more like a few lazy clouds. You realize how rare it is to be in a place where you can exist without explanation. Here, you don't have to be impressive. You don't have to be efficient. You can simply be a tired human drinking something warm in a city that understands tiredness. When you stand to leave, you feel steadier, not energized in a frantic way, but restored, the kind of restored that comes from gentle consistency. You step back outside, the fog now lighter, the air cooler against your warmed face. You return to the gondola carrying the taste of coffee and pastry, and the sense that comfort doesn't always require a grand solution. Sometimes it's just steam on a window, a bitter sip, a sweet crumb, and the quiet permission to pause. The gondola nudges away from the steps, and you drift onward, warmed from the inside, ready to let the city show you whatever comes next, without demanding it hurry. The warmth from coffee and pastry lingers in you like a small, private lantern, and it makes the canal air feel less sharp as the gondola carries you away. The fog is thinner now, still present, still softening the edges, but it has begun to lift in slow, deliberate folds, as if someone backstage is pulling curtains apart one careful inch at a time. You don't get a dramatic reveal. Venice isn't that kind of host. It prefers to let you notice grandeur only after you've proven you can handle quiet. The canal widens, gradually at first, then with a sudden spaciousness that makes your chest expand in response. Water opens around you like a dark silk sheet stretched flat. The gondola remains small against it, a slim black line moving with steady purpose. You feel the city shift from intimate corridors to something broader, an artery rather than a vein, and you understand where you are before you even see the full view. The Grand Canal. Even in fog, it announces itself through scale. The water carries more light, the surface catching pale gold where the morning finally decides to show up. The air feels busier, not loud, but layered. You sense movement beyond the mist, boats passing, wakes overlapping, the city's practical machinery warming up. It's still early, still gentle, but the day has started doing its work. Shapes rise on either side, palazzi, those old, proud buildings that sit directly on the water as if they never considered living any other way. Their facades emerge in stages, first a pale wall, then arched windows, then carved stonework that looks like lace made solid. Some corners are crisp, others fade into fog like memories. Balconies curl outward, ironwork dark against the soft sky. You see marble columns at water level, stained where tides have climbed, and you remember the planks stacked for higher water, the neat knots checked for shifting levels. Even here, in the city's most famous corridor, reality keeps its hand on the luxury. A larger boat moves through the mist, its engine sound muted by the remaining fog. It doesn't roar, it hums, a low, practical vibration. Its wake reaches you a moment later, soft, rolling waves that lift the gondola gently and set it down again. The gondola responds like it's done this 1,000 times, swaying without complaint, as if to say, "Yes, yes, everyone's waking up, try not to be dramatic about it." You watch the water's surface change under the wake. Reflections stretch, break, and reassemble. A palace becomes a smear of cream and gold, then reforms into columns and windows. A lamp's glow flickers as a trembling ribbon. Venice teaches you again that nothing stays perfectly still, and that doesn't mean it's broken. It simply means you're alive inside movement. The fog parts further, and the Grand Canal begins to show off, still subtly, still with that restrained confidence that makes you respect it more. On one side, a facade gleams pale as bone, its windows framed by delicate stone tracery. On the other, a darker building holds its mass like a sleeping giant, heavy brick softened by damp air. You pass a doorway at water level, steps disappearing into the canal, and it strikes you how Venice's grandeur sits directly on the same watery vulnerability as everything else. Fancy lace above, tide stain below. A perfect summary of the human condition, honestly. More boats appear. Work boats, delivery boats, the occasional sleek water taxi sliding past like it's late for a meeting. Even their movement feels choreographed, lines chosen carefully in a space where water is both road and living thing. You notice how everyone keeps distance, how wakes are managed, how turns are made with quiet courtesy. This is traffic, yes, but it's water traffic, less honking, more negotiation with physics. As the gondola glides along the Grand Canal's curve, the city's architecture becomes a slow parade. You see ornate cornices, faded fresco patches, arches stacked above arches. Some buildings look freshly tended, their surfaces cleaned, their details crisp. Others look weathered, their plaster peeling slightly, their beauty worn into softness. You find yourself appreciating the worn ones more because they feel like they've earned their quiet. They're not trying to be perfect. They're just still here. A bridge looms in the distance, high, pale, and solid against the thinning fog. For a moment, it's only an outline, then it sharpens, revealing stone steps rising like a spine. People cross it in small clusters, silhouettes moving steadily upward and down. The bridge feels like a hinge between worlds. One side, the calmer morning you've been drifting through, the other side, the day that will eventually demand things from you again. You don't dread that demand as much now. Bread warmed your hands, furnace heat softened your chest, a courtyard taught you the dignity of routine. The tide taught you procedure over panic. Coffee and pastry reminded you that comfort can be simple. And the fog, annoying, beautiful fog, taught you how to find your way without needing everything to be clear. The Grand Canal now feels like the reward for all that quiet learning. Venice saying, "Fine, you've been gentle enough. Here's the big view." The air brightens. The fog lifts another layer. The water turns from ink to polished slate, catching more of the sky's pale gold. You see more detail now: boats tied at moorings, striped poles standing like candy canes without the sugar, windows opening wider as people wake up. A gull passes overhead, its call sharper in the clearing air, as if even the birds are finally stretching. The gondola keeps its pace, unhurried amid the wider world, and you feel strangely protected by that slowness. The Grand Canal's grandeur doesn't pull you into urgency. It simply surrounds you with scale and history, and the soft astonishment of human hands building beauty on a lagoon that never promised stability. You let your gaze drift over the palaces, the bridges, the widening light. You let the water's movement hypnotize you again, and as the fog continues to open like curtains, you realize the city isn't awaking abruptly. It's awaking the way you want to awake, slowly, kindly, with time to become yourself before the day asks anything at all. The Grand Canal continues to curve ahead of you, and the city's larger shapes grow clearer as the fog loosens its hold. Yet even as visibility improves, Venice keeps one hand on mystery. It reveals enough to make you gasp quietly inside, then pulls back just a little, like a friend who knows you'll appreciate the tease more than the full reveal. The gondola stays true to its pace, refusing to rush even when the world around it starts moving faster. As you drift, you notice details that don't belong purely to architecture or commerce, small signs of old belief tucked into the city's routine, like stitches in a coat. A tiny charm hangs near a doorway, barely visible until the angle of light catches it. A faded symbol painted above a threshold looks less like decoration and more like protection. You can't read every meaning, but you can feel the intention. In a city built on water and weather and uncertainty, people have always wanted something, anything, that makes the world feel slightly more negotiable. The fog, in its thinning, starts to reveal shop fronts and narrow passageways leading away from the canal. In one window, you see the pale outline of a mask, white, smooth, and expressionless, suspended like a face waiting for a person. Nearby, another mask appears in darker tones, with a long beak shape that looks both ridiculous and eerie, depending on how awake you are. Even through glass, even half hidden by mist, the masks carry an unmistakable Venice energy, theatrical, historic, and slightly mischievous. You remember gently that Venice has always lived a double life. There is the practical city, boats, knots, planks, bread, tides, and there is the city of spectacle, carnival, masquerade, secret identities, the thrill of being unseen while being surrounded by people. The two lives aren't separate. They overlap like reflections on the canal, each one warping the other. As the gondola glides past a cluster of small workshops, you see more hints of that older, playful superstition. A small bundle of herbs hangs near a doorway, dried and twisted, placed where it can catch the air and perhaps catch something else too: bad luck, envy, the invisible weight of other people's thoughts. A carved stone lion sits above a wall, worn smooth at the edges, watching the canal with ancient patience. Whether it is a symbol of power or protection, it holds the quiet authority of something people trusted long before they trusted weather forecasts. You pass beneath a bridge and feel the echo return briefly, as if the city is whispering in an enclosed corridor. Remember, the old stories still live here. On the other side, the open air returns, and the water carries a softer light. The fog is now thin enough to reveal the outlines of distant domes, rounded shapes rising above the facades like slow bubbles breaking the surface of the city. They look suspended, dreamlike, as if Venice is floating not just on water, but on myth. A local presence appears again near a landing, and this time their gesture is toward a small stall or shopfront tucked back from the canal. The movement is subtle, almost conspiratorial, like they're letting you in on a secret. You step onto stone and move closer, drawn by the quiet glow inside. The shop is dim, filled with shapes that catch light in small flashes: gold leaf, painted surfaces, polished edges. Masks line the walls in various forms, some simple and pale, some ornate with curling designs, some with delicate patterns that look like lace painted onto the face. They are beautiful, yes, but they also carry a strange, calm menace, not violent, just unsettling in the way an expressionless face can be. Masks remind you that people have always wanted to become someone else for a while, to hide, to play, to escape the burden of being known. In a corner, you notice small objects, charms, beads, little tokens meant to be carried. Some are shaped like hands, others like tiny horns or eyes. They sit quietly, not screaming magic, but simply existing as part of the city's background belief system. You feel the soft pull of superstition in yourself. How easy it is to want a talisman when life feels unpredictable. How comforting it is to believe you can carry protection in your pocket, even if logic rolls its eyes. And maybe logic can roll its eyes. Logic can be insufferable. It thinks it can solve everything with spreadsheets. But Venice, with its fog and tides and ancient stone, gently suggests that humans are not built solely from logic. We are built from story, too, from ritual, from small actions that make the world feel less sharp. You step back outside, and the gondola waits again, patient. The fog is almost gone now, replaced by a pale morning brightness that makes the canal look more real. Yet the masks and charms stay in your mind like after-images. You realize the city doesn't need you to believe in superstition literally. It only needs you to understand why it exists, because uncertainty is exhausting, and humans have always invented ways to soften it. As you settle back into the gondola, you notice a small charm tied discreetly near the seat. Something simple, not flashy, perhaps placed there by someone who believes in a little extra safety for those drifting through fog. You don't mock it, you don't worship it. You simply accept it as part of the city's tender, slightly cheeky way of surviving. Do the practical work, tie the knots, stack the planks, and also, why not, carry a tiny symbol that says you're not alone against the tide. The gondola glides onward, and the Grand Canal's expanse begins to feel less like a stage and more like a corridor leading you gently towards farewell. The morning is brighter now, but the dreamlike quality remains, held in the city's lingering myths and the quiet understanding that sometimes, to rest, you need both reality and a little bit of magic. You drift onward with the gentle absurdity of having met a city that can be both practical and enchanted without tripping over itself. The fog has thinned to a soft residue now, more like breath on glass than a wall in front of you. Morning light spreads across the canal in pale layers, pearl, then straw gold, revealing more of what was previously withheld. Venice doesn't snap into focus, it eases into it, like a person waking slowly, blinking, choosing kindness over urgency. The gondola keeps its calm pace even as the Grand Canal grows livelier. More boats pass now, their wakes overlapping in careful ripples. A water taxi glides by with quiet confidence, sleek and efficient, as if it has never once paused to stare at a palace and feel emotional about it. Good for it. The rest of us are over here trying to remember how to breathe. You feel the city's shift from private morning to public day. Window shutters open wider. A few more figures appear on bridges, moving with the steady purpose of people who have somewhere to be but refuse to be dramatic about it. The occasional clink of metal returns, rings, ropes, the soft punctuation of work. Even the gulls sound more awake, their calls sharper as the air clears. And yet, inside the gondola, your experience remains slow. The boat is still a pocket of hush traveling through a waking world. You watch palaces slide past, facades of pale stone and worn plaster, arched windows looking out like patient eyes. Below them, the waterline marks remain, tide stains and damp bands that quietly insist on the truth you learned earlier. Even grandeur has to deal with water. As the gondola turns away from the broad canal and slips toward narrower passages again, you feel the return beginning, not like a reversal, but like a gentle spiral closing. The city's hidden corridors greet you as if they remember you. Narrow canals reappear, walls leaning close, the water darkening into a softer, more intimate tone. The echo changes under a low arch, then relaxes again on the other side. Your body registers these shifts the way it registers familiar rooms in a home, not with thought, but with ease. A faint scent drifts by, yeast and warmth, and for a moment you're back at the market steps, holding paper in your hands that radiates heat. You can almost feel the crust crackling between your fingers again, the simple comfort of a bite that asked nothing from you except presence. The memory doesn't make you hungry so much as it makes you calm. It reminds you that nourishment can be quiet, routine, offered without a speech. Farther along, a warm amber glow flashes briefly from a doorway near water level, and the image of molten glass returns, heavy, luminous, turning patiently on a rod. You remember how the craft demanded restraint, how the cooling process mattered as much as the fiery transformation. You feel that lesson settle into you again. You can shape yourself gently. You can cool slowly. You don't have to harden in panic. The gondola slides past another courtyard opening, just a glimpse through a narrow passage where laundry lines still hang like soft flags in the damp air. White fabric catches the brighter morning now, glowing faintly against stone. The wellhead sits at the center, steady as ever, an anchor point for generations of small tasks. You don't need to enter again. The mere sight is enough to pull your breathing into that steady domestic rhythm. Clip, smooth, fold, repeat. The kind of care that doesn't trend, but holds a life together. A bell toll reaches you, distant now and softened by space rather than fog. It's not commanding, it's simply there, as if the city is keeping time in a way that doesn't punish you for being tired. You remember the dim interior of the church, wax and shadow, marble underfoot, the quiet permission to put your worry down for a moment. That memory feels like a hand placed lightly over your chest, reassuring rather than restrictive. You pass a small landing where planks are stacked neatly against a wall, ready for when the water decides to be inconvenient again. The boards look ordinary in the clearer daylight, almost boring, but you know what they represent now: practiced response, quiet preparedness, the refusal to turn change into catastrophe. You feel a small private respect for this city that refuses to pretend it can control the lagoon, yet keeps showing up anyway, tying knots, checking thresholds, building temporary streets with calm hands. The gondola slips past a shop front where masks hang behind glass, now easier to see in the brighter morning. Their pale faces look less eerie and more like reminders. You can change who you are for a while. You can play. You can hide when you need rest. You also remember the tiny charm you noticed near your seat, simple and discreet. You still don't know if it works in any measurable way, but you understand why it exists. Sometimes a symbol is just a soft place for your mind to lean. And then, in the middle of these looping callbacks, you realize something quietly startling. You feel hosted. Not entertained, not sold to, not managed. Hosted. Guided by gestures, by routines, by a city that offered you its morning the way someone offers you a blanket, without demanding you perform gratitude, without making you explain yourself. The fog continues lifting as if it's exhaling its last. The canal ahead looks more familiar now. The stone edges, the angle of a bridge, the particular curve of a wall. You sense you are nearing where you began, though it doesn't feel like you are returning to the same person who stepped into the gondola earlier. That version of you carried the day's tension like a heavy bag. This version carries lighter things: warmth in your hands, gold glow in your eyes, a steadier relationship with uncertainty. The gondola glides on, and you let yourself feel the approaching end without clinging. You don't rush it. You don't try to squeeze in one more dramatic moment. You simply drift, letting Venice finish its quiet sentence, preparing you for a farewell that doesn't need words to be real. The canal curves in a way your body recognizes before your mind names it. The stone edges look familiar now. Not identical, because Venice is never identical from one moment to the next, but familiar in the way a dream location can feel like home, even if the details shift. Morning has brightened into a pale gold, and the fog has nearly surrendered. What remains is a soft haze clinging to distant corners, like sleep reluctant to let go of you completely. The gondola glides toward the landing where you began. You see the worn stones polished by time and tide, and the subtle marks where water has risen and retreated. The canal looks calmer here, protected by the curve of buildings and the quiet patience of routine. A lamp that once seemed like a small moon now looks simply like a lamp, still glowing faintly out of habit. A doorway across the water is clearer now, its paint chipped, its handle worn shiny, its threshold raised just enough to suggest someone has learned the tide's lessons well. As the gondola slows, you feel a small pinch in your chest, the gentle ache of endings. Not grief exactly, more like that tender realization that rest is a place you visit, not a place you permanently live. You can't stay in this moment forever. You can only let it change you quietly and then carry it back into the day. The boat eases alongside the stone edge. There's no dramatic docking, no jolt, just a soft touch of wood against stone, as if the gondola is arriving with manners. You shift your weight carefully, step onto the landing, and feel the cool stone under your feet, solid, damp, real. The canal air brushes your face, cleaner now that the fog is thinned, and you taste a faint saltiness that reminds you the sea is always nearby, even when the city feels enclosed. You turn back to the gondola. It sits low in the water, black lacquer catching the morning light in a restrained sheen. The metal prow piece glints briefly, then softens again. The boat looks both ancient and immediate, as if it has always been here and will always be here, doing the same quiet work of carrying people through softened mornings. A local presence stands near the gondola, calm and unhurried. They don't wave dramatically. They don't insist on closure. Their posture is the city's signature, practical, gentle, and slightly amused by how emotional visitors can get about a boat ride in fog. And honestly, fair. You probably didn't survive this in the usual way. You survived it by letting yourself be guided, by surrendering to slowness, by allowing quiet routines to reshape your nervous system without asking for permission. You take one last look along the canal. The fog that once swallowed everything now hangs only in distant patches, and the buildings show their details: arched windows, iron balconies, plaster worn into softness. You see the layered history in the walls, repairs, stains, small cracks that have been accepted and tended rather than erased. You see the truth Venice has been teaching you all morning. Endurance doesn't have to be loud. It can be gentle. It can be procedural. It can be beautiful without being perfect. For a moment, you catch flickers of the places you visited, as if the city is offering you a closing montage without making it cheesy. The market's waking bread returns as a scent memory, warm paper in your hands. The glass workshop's furnace glow returns as a warmth in your chest. The courtyard's laundry lines return as a soft sway overhead. The church's candles return as small, steady flames in your mind. The moment of being lost returns as a reminder that fog does not equal failure. It equals uncertainty, and uncertainty can be navigated by attention. The planks stacked for the tide return as a symbol of calm preparation. The masks return as a permission slip to rest behind a softer face when the world demands too much. You let those images settle without grabbing at them. You don't need to turn them into goals. You don't need to monetize them. You can simply carry them like a small charm in your pocket, quiet reassurance that softness exists and you can find it again. The gondola begins to drift away from the landing, slowly, as if it's reluctant to make a sharp exit. The water takes it with the same patient motion you've been floating in all night. Stroke, glide, settle. You watch it move into the canal's curve, becoming smaller, then partly hidden by a remaining veil of haze. It looks like a sentence trailing off into a soft ellipsis rather than a hard period. You stand on the stone for a moment longer, letting the morning air cool your skin, letting your breath move in and out without you trying to manage it. The city around you continues waking. Somewhere a door opens. Somewhere footsteps cross a bridge. Somewhere a cup is set down on a counter. Ordinary life resumes its quiet pulse, and you feel yourself ready to rejoin it. Still tired, perhaps, but steadier, less jagged. You turn away from the canal and begin to walk, slowly, with the kind of care Venice taught you. Your steps are unhurried. Your mind is softer. You carry the morning like a secret, a private lantern you can light later when the day gets too sharp. And now, you let the image loosen, like a ribbon slipping from your fingers. The canal grows quieter behind you, not because it stops existing, but because you no longer need to cling to it. You can feel the last of the fog in your mind as a gentle haze, the kind that doesn't confuse you anymore, only softens edges. Your breathing becomes slower and longer, each inhale arriving like a calm tide, each exhale retreating like water sliding back down stone steps. You imagine the gondola continuing without you, black lacquer gliding through pale morning light, the oar dipping with that patient rhythm, the water receiving each stroke like a hush. The city's facades fade slightly as your eyelids grow heavier. Windows become soft rectangles, bridges become curved shadows, lantern light becomes a warm blur. Nothing needs to be sharp right now. Your shoulders sink deeper into stillness. Your jaw relaxes. Your hands unclench, one finger at a time, as if you're setting down a weight you've carried all day without noticing. Venice in your mind becomes less a place and more a feeling. Warm bread in paper, a candle's steady flame, a sheet hanging in damp air, a quiet plank laid over water, a small charm tucked where you can reach it. If any worries return, you don't fight them. You let them drift like mist over a canal, passing through, thinning, dissolving. You don't have to solve tonight. You only have to rest. The world can wait outside the door for a few hours. It will still be there in the morning, but you will meet it with a softer gaze. The gondola's final curve becomes a slow, comforting loop in your imagination, repeating until it feels like a lullaby. Stroke, glide, settle. Stroke, glide, settle. Each repetition smooths your thoughts, lengthens your breath, quiets your pulse. And as the last light fades into the gentle gray of sleep, you allow yourself to disappear into that calm space where nothing is required, where you are held, where you are safe. End of story. Sweet dreams.